Hello there, I'm Martyn Ramsey and welcome to this week's episode of Dominant. Last week we looked at the summer of 1987 and the start of season 87-88, but that summer was just an overture before the autumnal first act. 2 months that perfectly encapsulated this Rangers season in that it was chaos disguised by the veneer of stability. After that defeat at Parkhead, where we left off last time, Rangers won 18 points from the next 22, scoring 26 league goals in the process, including 7 without reply at home to Martyn, with precocious and Falco scoring a hat-trick apiece. It was a benevolent run of fixtures where the wins were expected and the drop points, a draw at Tynecastle and a defeat at Tannadice, ultimately feared, but it left Rangers only 3 points behind Celtic and with a game in hand. Woven throughout this period, however, was an almost violent volatility. In the space of 8 weeks, between the middle of September to the middle of November, Rangers would have their manager banned for 5 games, their most precocious midfield talent hand in a transfer request, their star striker guilty of assault, their 3 big English imports charged by the police, and their captain ruled out for the season, whilst also breaking the Scottish transfer record on a player who would become a club legend, qualify for the quarter-finals of the European Cup, and play 3 matches which, more than 30 years on, fans still regard as among the greatest Rangers games of all time. Joining me to discuss all of that are my 2 guests. David Edgar, how are we?
I'm okay, thank you. Yes, it's nice to be back on. A very interesting season, as Andy and John pointed out last week. There was a lot going on almost throughout this season, and it never really seemed to settle down. It felt chaotic almost from the start.
And joining David and I is Alan Bradley. How are we, Alan?
Yeah, I'm good. And again, looking forward to this one. It was a strange one, definitely not in my favourite seasons, but again, certainly 3 of the games being probably 3 of my favourite games of all time. So, as David said, very much a kind of up and down all the way through things. So, we're not looking forward to getting through it. Martyn, yeah.
I asked the 2 boys last week this question. I'll ask you guys as well. Since that title was clinched in May of 1987, after so long, finally you had a summer to think about the European Cup and Rangers being back in the European Cup. David, you, for the first time, like I, would be thinking about Rangers in a European Cup. And from the top of the club, the noises were about, building a side that could compete in Europe, not just being the best in Scotland. And I guess with the right draw, a wee bit of luck, there's even a chance that, Rangers could be in the competition beyond Christmas. And then, who knows, cup football and all that. I do wonder how much of that optimism was punctured on the 9th of July when Rangers were handed one of the toughest first-round draws imaginable. A pivotal moment in European football, though no one would know that at the time. 32 sides all put into an open draw, unseeded, and it threw up ties like AGF Aarhus against Yunus Ech, and also Real Madrid versus Napoli, the latter of which was really the starter for any discussion about a European league, because Berlusconi thought, my goodness, what if Milan are in a similar situation? That can't happen. Maybe a group format might be the best way forward. David, Dynamo Kiev lacked, I guess, the glamour of being the champions of Spain or Italy, but they were feared. They won the Cup Winners' Cup in '86, only defeated by the eventual winners of the European Cup, Porto, in the semi-finals in the 1987. A national team in all but name, with so many players dominating that USSR squad that had impressed in Mexico in '86, and of course would go on to the final of the European Championships the following summer. And a legendary manager, Valery Lobanovsky, who was both in charge of Kiev and the USSR. And this is a big test for a rookie manager, who was, I guess, wanting to make a similar attempt in this competition as he had as a player.
Absolutely. You have to remember that this is an era where it's not inconceivable for Scottish teams to win and get to finals. Already in my short time watching football, I'd had Aberdeen win the Cup Winners' Cup and Dundee United get to the final of the UEFA Cup. So it wasn't inconceivable that you could go and do it, and it was a legitimate thing to dream about. Although obviously it was before I was born. It's only 16 years since Rangers have won the Cup Winners' Cup, and therefore the memories are still fresh that we can go and do it, that we can go and produce something at that level. Not only, I think, the belief that we could, but an expectation that we should. That actually wasn't just at Rangers. Look, Scottish teams when they went into Europe, this must sound so alien to our younger listeners. You were expected to go and do something, whether it would be 2-3 rounds. As you say, draw came into it. It was open draws. So there was an understanding if you drew Bayern Munich first out, then fair enough. Or in the UEFA Cup, if you got an Italian side, fair enough. But if the draw was basically anyone from anywhere else, Scottish teams collectively were all expected to go and do quite well in these competitions. And it was a measuring stick, I think. When Dynamo Kiev came out the hat, though, you're absolutely right, because first of all, there was respect for how good they were. Secondly, there was that unknown issue that you really only saw these players every couple of years at World Cups and European Championships. And you were aware of how good they were, but also you weren't aware of what you were going into, because this is still the communist era. As you mentioned there, we're playing aside from the Soviet Union, for example, not playing. Now it's a Ukrainian side, but back then they were a Soviet side. So you couldn't be sure what you were travelling into. You couldn't expect a large away support, if any at all, because of the sheer difficulty in getting there and in being allowed to enter the country, and the desirability to, because you certainly didn't want to get stuck behind that Iron Curtain back then. So all of those factors kicked into play, I think. But it was also tinged with an excitement that, look, if we can get past them, then you would expect to have an easier draw in the next round. It would be very unlucky to then get through. And of course, when the champions of Spain come out against the champions of Italy, meaning one of them are going, then you begin to think, okay, huge hurdle, but cross it and who knows.
Alan, your levels of excitement, were they tempered by the draw? Because it's tough.
Yeah, they were obviously, but again, as David mentioned, and this is where old Alan comes in. Okay, as a kind of young kid beating a European Cup Winners' Cup final late 60s, and know full well how we did obviously in the 72. Remember all the games going through that one. And then as a 17-year-old, seeing us drawing Juventus in Greg's first game, the Italian champions, knocking them out over two legs, then playing PSV, who hadn't been beaten in yonks in their ground, knocking them out, and actually should have gone through against Cologne. So, again, as David said, there was that wee bit of because we had done so well last season, the team were looking better. There definitely was oh my goodness, it's behind the Iron Curtain, it's Dynamo Kiev. But again, in the back of my mind was hey-ho, you never know over two legs, and then you see how things open up.
The first leg was on September the 16th, a 1-0 defeat in Kiev. But enough hope that this journey wouldn't terminate at its first stop. Only 1-0. Souness played 5 in midfield himself: Derek Ferguson, Ian Durrant, John McGregor, Navi Cohen, with Durrant being the one asked to support McCoist in any rare attack. McCoist actually had a huge opportunity to put Rangers into a lead. 100,000 people in that stadium. Rangers fans fewer than 100. 50 minutes to go when Kiev were given a penalty. Roberts' tackle on Alexei Mikhailichenko being deemed illegal, and Miko converted the penalty himself. But it was considered a brave performance, especially from McCoist, who was bearing the brunt of the closest attention, mostly from Ole Kuznetsov, it must be said. But maybe more guile would be required at Ibrox. Did either of you go to Ibrox to watch this on an erected screen at mid-afternoon? Would have been in Glasgow, with that early autumnal light making that screen almost invisible to the naked eye. I mean, it was a bold kind of move, I suppose. Did anyone go?
I didn't, but my cousin Alex, who's 9 years older than me, did. He was able to bunk off his day at work. He was an apprentice, and along with his gaffer, which obviously helped, and about 15 others from the factory, they went along and just what you said, Martyn, that they couldn't see, because this is very much in its infancy, and the technology was difficult to get right back then. What they basically did was put out, basically a tarpaulin, they call it a screen, but it was basically that, project onto it, which is anybody who's even got a home projection knows you've got to close the curtains, because light is not your friend. So had it been at night, I actually think it might have worked really well, almost like a drive-in movie.
Yeah.
But because, as you say, it was through the afternoon, which again added to the strangeness of it. But it was, we were able to listen to it in the school. Good thing about coming from Ayrshire, if Rangers are playing, even the teachers are like, no, right, come on, in here. And I just remember it being incredibly tense. The commentary, Alan, you'll remember this as well, commentary from behind Iron Curtain then used to come down a phone line.
That's right.
It wasn't crystal clear commentary. It was that crackly, as I say, the sort of phone, bad connection commentary. And we were doing pretty well. Obviously going for a 0-0, which British teams did back then a lot. It was considered. We never really got our heads round away goals in the UK, which is why we went out on them so often. But it was considered. You go away from home and you get a 0-0 and then you come back. You mentioned two things there, because there was highlights on later that night. Funnily enough, on Reporting Scotland, they had cameras at Ibrox, not at not the Soviet Union. They'd sent to report on the screening. But watching the highlights back, a couple of things. One, the penalty can go either way, and two, the treatment McCoist gets, and in general, you're not getting decisions. Now I know that, as Rangers fans, we still complain about referees to this day, understandably so. But back then it was fairly open. What's the word I'm looking for? Corruption is probably the right one. And you're not getting decisions in the Soviet Union. You just aren't. You're not getting them in Italy either, incidentally, or Germany, as we saw the previous season. Referees very much did tend to favour the bigger sides in the bigger countries, and these referees tended to leave those grounds, with a new watch or a fur coat for the wife. So it was just how it went. It was just how it was. You couldn't prove it, and there wasn't a lot of scrutiny on it. But there was this feeling of okay, because it was very
Not
much keep the tie alive. Yeah, keep the tie alive. Don't get hammered. Okay, we lost 1-0, but that's by nowhere near the worst that it could be. There is this fear of an away goal, but again, because we didn't quite understand the away goals rule and how to use it, we didn't fear it, I think, Alan, and you'll have a better understanding of this. It just doesn't. These days, we'd all be going, can't lose one, because if we lose one, we need 3. And I don't really recall that in the media or the papers at the time. We just didn't think in terms of that kind of lovely British Corinthian naivety of, right, well, see how that game goes, and then now we need to beat them at home. We didn't. It was almost like we thought that using an away goal as part of your tactics was almost cheating somehow.
I think you're right, David. I remember even as a kid seeing some of these foreign teams coming and doing that, and obviously, the way they were playing and saying to my dad, why are they doing this? Because as you say, well, that's not the way you play football. And he was like, listen, son, and as you say, it was a whole different thing. But a couple of things on the screen. I didn't go. I think I was a postal officer at the counter, so I couldn't get time off. David Best and Barry, the two guys I went with at the time, they were students. You guys will know all about this. So it was no bother for them. They could go. But I've not let that go. I'll still bring it up again. But the two of them went to it. They said it was very difficult to see it. And the only other couple of things are, obviously, Leeds back in the Fairs Cup. They actually showed the Leeds game down in Elland Road up at Ibrox, but again it was night, to make your point, Martyn, so that was obviously a bit better. And the other one too I picked up in the Evening Times, did you know that Glasgow City Council weren't going to let us put the big screen in because we hadn't paid this £100 entertainment licence?
Yeah.
We said it's a sporting event. They said, oh, no, you should have applied for a £100 entertainment licence. We're not sure whether we can allow you.
Yeah, went right to the wire, I think. It's such a strange to hear that the relationship with Glasgow City Council at that time was not particularly good.
Martyn, just as another thing that, again, is slightly different, something that's different culturally now, again, as to how odd this was. Alan mentioned the people who could go and the people who couldn't go. My cousin and his workmates told me that a lot of the folks there were either students or pensioners, because a lot of people work in factories where you got 2 weeks off in the summer when the factory closed down and 2 weeks off at Christmas. You didn't have
fair or not,
yeah, absolutely. That's where that comes from. You didn't have this thing that we all take for granted now, which is you book your own days off. It wasn't like that. It was you had your set 2 weeks. So to go there, you either had to phone in sick, and let's face it, your boss would know, or you just couldn't go. So it was just really strange. And as I say, so strange that the news stations actually sent reporters to cover this weird event at Ibrox.
2 weeks later, it was pouring in Glasgow as the Dynamo Kiev players had their customary training session on the away ground the night before the game. Graham Souness went along to watch. He noticed the amount of long passes that were being sprayed out wide, especially onto the left-hand side to Ivan Yaremchuk. Nothing revolutionary. Kiev's success had been built upon stretching the play so as to provide more space for their kind of technical prowess to shine. But it forced him into making some last-minute alterations before kick-off. I spoke to Campbell Ogilvie about this. He said, look, I arrived at 4 p.m. on the day of the game and noticed it straight away, but it was between Graham and the grounds when I'm not sure anyone else knew. Even the Rangers players were unaware until they turned up for duty that the dimensions of their home turf had been narrowed by 4 yards at either side. We'll get to the game in a moment, but even after the delirium of that game, Campbell Ogilvie couldn't revel in the celebrations because his opposite number at Kiev, Mikhail Oshinkov, had his finger in his face, demanding that the pitch be measured after the match. So they went down with the UEFA delegate, and he said he went to pick the tape that the groundsman had left on the ground, and he grabbed it off him. He wouldn't let him touch the tape. This was an hour after the match because he was adamant that the television cameras be packed away before it took place. But it was right on the limit, and a famous night at Ibrox ensued.
Well, I think the Russians will gobble that up. I know that Rangers are trying to concentrate on height in the air. Here's a great chance. It must be. It is. Oh dear. Rangers are in the lead. Alan McCoy's picking it up down. Here's Souness. Now Francis. Jimmy Nicholl on the right. Doesn't wait for him though. Falco is in there, and that's a goal. Ali McCoist. What a beautiful combination. They've threatened it all night. And Scotland's top goal scorer has given Rangers an impressive lead. Now Kirkwood. Durant. Now Souness. What he had in mind all the way. Everybody on the feet at Ibrox, and there it goes. Rangers are through to the next round of the European Cup, knocking out one of the most formidable forces in European football, Dynamo Kiev, in a first-half performance of great level indeed. After they scored that second goal, they went into the shell, and although they looked dangerously, these supporters lifted them up. A highly notable victory for a Scottish club.
Okay, so much to talk about this game. There's 3 games I wanted to look at in this episode. All of them have been on the 10 Cap Show, folks, so you go and fill your boots with an hour's worth there. But Ross Hendry was doing Kiev, and one thing you noticed was he just felt different walking to the game, because Rangers were back in the European Cup, and that excitement. So for many, a generation, him included, you as well, David, I imagine, this is the first time you're going to a European Cup game at Ibrox. Before you even get in and notice that Ibrox looks very different, David, Was that something as you made your way that night?
Yeah, definitely. I was aware of it at home, maybe not among my schoolmates so much, but my dad and my family very, very much. This is the big one. We've waited a long, long time to be in this, and they'd watched on jealously as Scottish teams got to go and have a go at this. So it was massive. And I can totally agree with what Ross said about that, because we always parked in the same place. You got out and you walked, and there was almost like a purposeful stride in the walk of everyone going. Nobody was sort of milling around, really. Everyone was almost as if they'd a part to play in it, walking quite determinedly to the ground. And sometimes you can just sense a special occasion in the air. You don't necessarily have a reason for it, that just the crowd is on. There's an electricity in the air. I know that's a cliche, but I can't think of another way to describe it. It just feels different, and you can't bottle it, or football clubs would, and you can't engineer it with a light show or a pre-match chantathon or whatever.
You can't contrive these things.
You can't.
It's sported as a spectator, as a fan, whether you're there as a football tourist just observing something, or you're an absolute diehard. Atmosphere is always generated by the contest. It's always generated by the reality, 100%. The jeopardy, what's on the line. You can bang a drum for 90 minutes, do not care. You're trying to contrive something, which has its merits. But the ultimate frisson that's there is dependent on what might happen, what could happen. Could dreams be made? Will it be a nightmare? Whatever. That's what creates something special, and you can't manufacture it. Alan, you'd seen Rangers.
Sorry, just before we go, that's exactly it, and that's exactly what it was like. That I can't tell you why it was different. I can't tell you why people were, as I say, more purposeful in their walk to the ground, or more. I don't know. But what I will say is everybody, the first thing they said when we got in the ground was what's happened to the park. Because it was so noticeable. I mean, it was, did you say 4 on either side?
Yeah.
That makes it. I mean, that's quite a big distance. But also because you can't scrub the previous lines, they're still really there. You can see them, so you're like, something's happened there.
Alan, you've seen Rangers in Europe before, but you've seen Rangers in the European Cup before. Did this feel different with the sense of freshness and a newly found ambition and big talk, really, from the top of the club down, and the fact that it was game on, it was only 1-0. Did that walk to Ibrox feel different that night?
There was, because, as you say, the transition. I mean, we were the biggest club in Britain, with all of the stuff that had happened before, behind the scenes as well, and how we had done. There's David mentioned something about the atmosphere of purposelessness about it. I always had the feeling in these big European games, and I say even now under the lights, it doesn't matter who comes to Ibrox, there's it's all this family thing that we have going back to my grandfather, my great-grandfather, my dad, and so on. There's just this feeling of, this is like our place in the world. This is like the famous Glasgow Rangers here. These people are coming. There's just a kind of special thing about it. Obviously, because I had known about the previous ones, it was Juventus, it was 1-0. We could, if we get an early goal and get things going. So the atmosphere as well, when walking into the ground, obviously, you do feel it. There isn't a hanging about. It's like, let's get in, let's actually see, as the guys are warming up. But I remember we had one of those Premier Club ones, Martyn, the 160 quid jobs, where you sit up in the rear of the Govan, we about halfway towards the Celtic end. And I remember myself and David just coming up and looking over, and as David said, going, what's happened to but very quickly the penny did drop, and we were all going, as soon as it's done something. And I think at the time as well, ours was probably the widest in Scotland. Maybe Muirton Park was the kind of next one, so you knew. And again, even with the team warming up, the other team coming out and so on, there's just like we really need to be the 12th man now. And to a man, there's just kind of the noise, and it's like if we drop that at all, we're probably going to get beaten by, as you say, this this team are full internationals basically. But the atmosphere, I've never heard anything like it, and I've not heard anything like it since. So I'm sorry, and I've done the Parma one and so on, but it was just, you could actually see in their eyes as well, as if, Jesus, and obviously you go through the game too, but they were totally shell-shocked.
Yeah, and it is talked about still. That Marseille, Ibrox, Parma, it's an underrated one because we don't really want to talk about it given what happened in the game itself. Before AEK Athens, when we were 2-0, we will get to this, sadly, in due course, Ibrox was spine-tingling until Athens scored.
Yeah.
It was a disaster. But those are the games that still kind of ring true. For younger viewers, younger listeners, guys, it won't be as big, but you're talking about a 9-year gap from the European Cup. Does it in any way, for that younger experience, resemble Rapid Vienna, where you're back in league action for the first time in so long?
The European Cup was more special because you
They're
could only get,
wasn't it?
Yeah, that was it. You could only get into it by being the champions. You mentioned there, Martyn, there's 32 sides only in it. It was properly exclusive, and it felt properly exclusive. As much as I enjoyed and was proud of the side that European campaign, because they didn't expect to get through 4 qualifying rounds and then acquitted ourselves quite well. I don't, and I'm not one of these guys who's so everything was better back in the day, but I just don't think they're comparable. I think even the Malmo, for example, was our first time in the Champions League this year. It wasn't the same because there was a difference between.
I get
even
that.
The Champions League, I don't necessarily think would be the same because just felt so exclusive. It just felt like you really were in the rarefied air of only champions to be in this tournament.
You'd nothing to compare it to then in terms of what would become of the European Cup, but it's the fact that this is the top competition, call it what you like, that this is still the pinnacle of European football. It's been 9 years since we've been in it. You've never experienced it, David. So this, I understand why that atmosphere rings so true. And it's a big game. It's a big team. I wonder, you mentioned Malmo there, that's not the Champions League. That's a qualifier.
Exactly.
When Rangers get back to the Champions League in that first game with that music, after Christ knows how many years, I wonder if that will be, especially if it's a big name.
Maybe, but here's a fundamental difference, and this is a sad thing because it's the way football's gone, and I don't think younger people look at it. There's the jet. We thought we could win this, and we could have. Right? With a tailwind behind, as Alan mentioned, 78. That's a difference. Now, for a club from our league, getting into the Champions League is an end in itself. So there's almost a sense of, if you like, achievement just be, and it will be amazing when that night comes. I just don't think you can compare it to what you had to do back then to even be in about it. We're kind of going to be in Europe regardless these days, and that, and there's so many matches to be played just with the way the competitions are put out, and you can be eliminated from a competition and drop into another one. You can be eliminated from that and drop into a third. It was all or nothing. It was high stakes, and you had to win the league in the 80s against quite a few contenders to get there. And then once you got there, you felt you could win it, and all of those are things that have been taken away.
Yeah, sorry, David. And I think the beauty of this one too is this was the second leg as well. It wasn't even like, let's try and get the atmosphere, then let's see what happens. Even unlike, obviously, what happened in Dortmund, which was just like a dream, but my goodness, winning the second leg, that adds another wee bit to it as well, so...
Well, before we get 3 old men shouting at clouds and why life wasn't as good, even though the competition has improved demonstrably over that time, this was a great game of football, an exhilarating European Cup tie. I mean, McCoy, Falco, Durant, Francis, Nicol, all had good chances. McCoy should have had a penalty in the first half. Kiev looked dangerous, more and more dangerous the game went on. One away goal makes such a big difference to this game. And the 2 goals that Rangers did score had more than their fair share of luck, of course. Viktor Shanov in goals, trying a bit of off-spin for some reason in the penalty box. But Rangers were quick to it. and capitalised on that. And McCoy, he said he wanted to give the keeper the eyes, and I'm sure even he believes that.
A corner in his head,
yeah, he did. But who cares? Rangers were, I think, they were value for their fortune, and when that onslaught began, because again, one goal just changes everything. Incredibly, one of the biggest cheers of the night goes to a back pass from 80 yards or whatever it was from Souness, just to completely kill the game off. And that final whistle, it is Souness that's ringing from all the stands, because this is different from beating Clydebank or even beating Celtic. He at this time, can we really put into context for listeners who weren't there how synonymous Graham Souness was with the European Cup, having won it so often and been a part of quite a relatively recent legacy in that competition. And he's come here, he's played the game, I think, tactically quite nicely in Kiev, packing that midfield. He's footed around with the pitch, got inside their heads, and Rangers well worthy of a 2-0 win. And he seems to be bestowed upon him the architect of all this, David.
Yeah, and I think that's a wonderful point you made about how synonymous he was. He gave us a confidence to believe that we would be contenders, because that's what he was. He was always somebody who, he knew his way around the European Cup, and he'd held it aloft on a few occasions as well. That back pass, I know it's one of the most gift things from 80s football you'll see, because it's outrageous. I mean, he's about 30 yards from their goal, and he turns round and by the way, if any of his players had tried that, he would have had them by the throat. But he's got the confidence. And again, to younger listeners, a back pass was a very useful way of killing a game, because your keeper could pick it up, and therefore. But even then, I've never seen anyone do it from there before. I mean, the margin for error is huge, but it was that sort of confidence, that brazenness, if you like. And yeah, he was very much seen as the architect of this one, because again, it's a massive win, and I wonder if perhaps Dynamo Kiev's subsequent status in European football has maybe taken away some of that.
They were in a window, weren't they?
They
at
were.
That point.
They were a legitimate, in the top 3 or 4 clubs who could win this. They really were. And they were packed with talented players, because, of course, this is before Russian Soviet players could really go abroad. So they were packed with these star names. They'd been a goal up, and, to beat them felt it was equivalent of beating a German or a Spanish or an Italian side. It really, well, maybe not an Italian side, but you take my point. But you're right in the way that it to me, and remember, I'm 10 years old at this point, right? So I'm not going to claim that I have amazing insight or anything. But to me, it felt like Souness was the general, and the players were his lieutenants and sergeants and whatnot. He was always the leader of this group to me, on the pitch or off it. And I'm not surprised that and there were so many players that the fans liked as well in this Rangers team. You have to remember that it's hard to pick one out. There isn't one who, people may say Ali was the poster boy, but he was and he wasn't. He was a goal scoring guy, but people loved Terry Butcher.
Yeah. People
loved Roberts, Durant. Yeah, everyone had a favourite. They were a popular squad, but Souness was just this other level. And again, it's that epic and huge personality that he brought to that outsized personality that he brought to Scottish football, that record of achievement that he brought to Scottish football. So I've said it before on this show, and I probably will again. He was like my second dad, and it was just, if he said go and do this, I would go and do it, because I felt the players felt like that as well. That it was like that, and as I say, you can read too much into moments. It's something you talk about a lot, Martyn, and I get that. But in a way, I quite like that pass back sort of becomes the control of this game. Yeah,
It
because
symbolises
it's
control. Durant
It's
waxes,
that's-
Durant waxes lyrical about this lineup. He said, there'll be more talented Rangers lineups to come, but it would take 5 years to get one as blended as this. Trevor Francis is now in the Rangers team. Took him a while to get going. He takes a pass in this game as if a neighbourhood child has lost his ball and it's come over to him just as he's talking to his neighbour about trimming hedges or something like that. He's just so comfortable and well, more than a little bit arrogant, and we'll see a bit of that later on in this episode. Very quickly, boys, because I'm conscious of time as always in this show. The second round, again back behind the Iron Curtain, to play the Polish champions Górnik Zabrze on the 21st of October. We'll be playing them at Ibrox first. This is a bit of an underrated win. For reasons that we'll come on to, we roar into this game, the start of this game, 3 up in no time. McCoist, Durant and Falco. But the general play, Rangers are superb watching back the highlights of that game. Górnik get a goal back, which, as Rangers tire, and we'll get to reasons why they might be a little fatigued. But over there, McCoist gets a penalty, another 4-5-1 kind of smothering job, and it kills that tie kind of dead. Rangers are in the quarterfinals of the European Cup, and some of the play and poise in both games is genuinely excellent, Alan.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, those at this point in time, the likes of Durant, obviously when you've got Souness and so on, but Derek Ferguson, the second leg in particular, Davy Cooper, some of Davy Cooper's touches and passes, and I think he actually put the ball through for McCoist, who got pulled down for the penalty. But it was just breathtaking, and as you say, that first half at Ibrox as well, I mean, it was just all kind of touch and go, and we were playing some beautiful football. Okay, tired, as you say, kind of later on. But no, I mean, at that point in time, absolutely great to watch, and we could do that mix if it came to, the battle. Fine, probably overdone it, but again, we had some really nice link-up play and some. I would probably say, probably best I had seen since even the Davy Cooper, Gordon Smith, Bobby Russell. That middle to front. But again, as soon as had built this across the midfield too. So, no, top team at that point, Martyn. Yeah.
No one talks about the Górnik game, David. I would urge people to go and have a look at the highlights of the Ibrox game, because it's a sparkling performance by Rangers.
Even over there as well. Yeah, played really well over there too. Yeah.
And again, I've got to stress, behind the Iron Curtain, this air of mystery. They came with respect. They came with that as a tough game. Because of all it involves, and also it's difficult to do your research on them. I mean, it's not like now where they'll just go to, a computer and bring up their last 6 games. It wasn't like that at all. And Rangers were terrific that night, really smooth. I think the thing that struck me and strikes me now is just the confidence and how assured we were looking at this level. I think that's what really, really impressed me. That it also wasn't a Scottish performance. Rangers had some, even in my short lifetime, when we weren't very good, we'd had some really good European displays, like beating Inter Milan 3-1, and okay, we go out, but it's still a hell of a result. But it was a very Scottish performance. It was very blood and thunder, and getting about them and elbows in the throat.
We were playing them off the park, David. We were actually playing them off the park.
It's football, and it was passing and moving and touch. You mentioned there, Francis, in the previous game. These boys of ours could play football. They were physical, had to be domestically, but they could very much play football. And as I say, the thing that sort of struck me was just how comfortable we were looking at this level.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely fair. But despite the sparkle and sophistication that we've talked about, guys, it was a Rangers team still susceptible to indiscipline, both inside and outside the professional arena, and as soon as his patience was wearing thin, although he was hardly setting the best example, that Davy Syme altercation after he was sent off at Parkhead. Souness was banned for 5 games. This was the day after Alan McCoist was found guilty of assaulting a 19-year-old in that East Kilbride chippy that obviously we spoke about in some of the 86-87 shows. And Souness's tolerance kind of reaching breaking point, because there was another nightclub fight with Durrant, Robert Fleck, John McGregor in Airdrie this time, following a recording of the team single, the Glasgow Rangers boys. All 3 were fined £1,000. Durrant was feeling a bit trapped, public life, and I guess a professional frustration about being put out on the right-hand side of midfield, not a right winger, but a right-sided midfielder. Durrant demanded a transfer, and Souness called his bluff, famously threw the Rothmans at him and told him to go and pick a fucking team. Scotland-England 5-a-side at training, Durrant flew into a tackle, Souness bit back. Is that your best shot, was all Durrant could offer, which he regretted immediately. Souness's eyes were gone. He was going to punch his head off, and the whole squad actually had to break it up. I think Terry Butcher who's been pulled along by Souness, I think. And, Durrant is admitted he could be a naughty boy and he could wake up just in a foul mood and all of that. But we touched on this in the first episode, David, about Souness just losing control, seeing the end of his playing career, this professional identity that he'd worn so proudly for so many years. It's coming to an end. And he's talking about standards and discipline, and yet he's charging around a training ground, threatening blood from one of his most naturally gifted talents. He drops Durrant before the trip to Tannadice in October. Rangers lose 1-0, which is the first domestic defeat since Parkhead. It's just, again, not a manager in control, despite some of the frustrations that these young boys are providing him on and off the pitch. Something's gone wrong with Souness this season already.
Yeah, I wonder now, looking back at the end of last season, that we know that he completely lost his head that day against Aberdeen, and he's just not quite right at the moment, and it seems to be a frustration, and I can't quite understand what that frustration is. Maybe it's impatience. Maybe it's trying to get somewhere quicker than we can. But he was a raging bull, as you mentioned, in training on the park. Because let's face it, of all the ill-disciplined players in that Rangers team in his first 2 seasons, he was the worst by a mile.
Yeah.
And I think he's maybe chafing a little bit about the confines of Scottish football, the parochial nature of it, because he's come into it thinking this is quite a parochial, wee backwards place, and then Scottish Football Society's fallen over itself to prove to him how right he is about that. But there's a bit of confirmation bias there as well, and he just seems to be straining at the leash constantly. I wonder if as well there's that thing of he'd been at Liverpool, then he'd been at Sampdoria, and if there's a frustration about some of the players that he's playing alongside or he's playing against and the type of football that it is. I don't quite know, but he seemed to spend this whole season looking for a fight quite often finding it at the wrong time.
It doesn't seem to be very reflective all the way through looking at him. He doesn't seem to because he's making the same mistake, he's making the same. I don't even know about relationships he's got elsewhere. I think Walter would be a good one for him, well, certainly the way Walter carried himself, but I just don't know whether maybe Graham Souness wasn't the kind of guy to have a kind of older or a more experienced person. I don't know. Do you know what I mean? Because as you say, he just kept doing the same thing. He just seemed to be angry. And it was really funny, the don't do as I do as I tell you.
But by his own admission, though,
the time.
By his own admission, he felt he could do it all anyway. He felt he could do no wrong, and he was going to do it his way.
You just can't.
You can't. Yeah, you absolutely can't. You can't certainly do both jobs. I think that's fair enough. Durrant was called back for the next game, which would of course be the visit of Celtic, because he was needed. Rangers were 4 points behind Celtic, who were 2 points behind Hearts, who were the kind of early pace setters in the league. And this 90 minutes, few better 90-minute distillations of this Rangers season than this Old Firm game on the 17th of October. Brief moments of class, drowned out by raucous mayhem, wild sensationalism, and again, poor judgment. Both sides showcasing new recruits. Richard Gough had been made captain of Spurs in the summer of '87 after his first season there, but his wife had made it known that she couldn't stay in London for much longer, and despite his new deal, wanted to come home. Graham Souness was alert, and there was a first bid of £800,000 at the end of September, which failed, but a second offer was sensational. On the 2nd of October, Gough became Scotland's first ever £1 million signing when Rangers doubled the £750,000 that Spurs had originally paid Dundee United for him. Finally, this Ibrox financial muscle was back, but the rivals were flexing their own at the same time. Celtic secured Frank McAvenny from West Ham for £750,000. The Tottenham captain and the top goal scorer in the English League coming back north on the same day. They would both feature very heavily at Ibrox.
It stays up in support for Celtic. There's Morris. Phillips at full stretch, and the fullback did well. And an angry exchange there between McAvenny and Woods, and here's trouble now. And this is what everyone was hoping would not arise. McAvenny went hurtling into Woods. Woods reacted angrily. Then Butcher stepped in, and now the referee has a problem. Phillips cut off the cross. There was Woods with McAvenny. A very angry exchange between the pair. There's Woods and McAvenny clashing. In comes Butcher, and here's where the trouble really started with Roberts going across. Down goes McAvenny, and what action will now be taken by referee Jim Duncan? And referee calling across Woods and McAvenny. Well, certainly they were the principal players involved initially. And it really is a very tense moment to see which colour of card referee Duncan will show to these players. Richard Gough being invited to leave the scene. So the referee explaining carefully to the players the basis for the decision he's taking. And it's a red card, is it, for Frank McAvenny? It certainly appears to be a red card for McAvenny. Drama here at Ibrox. 17 minutes of the match gone. Frank McAvenny is ordered off. And the question now remains, what will happen to Chris Woods? Off goes McAvenny. Tense moments too for the Rangers fans. And a red card also for Chris Woods. Tangle of legs, it's sorted out by McCarthy. Here's a chance now for Walker. It's Andy Walker going through, and Roberts. No mistake this time. Celtic are in front. It on to Grant. Oh, that's a good ball from Stark. Here's Walker. That's for Peter Grant. That's the second. Hoisted into the box. Up goes Butcher. Francis with a shot, and the challenge by Butcher. Now Butcher will be in serious trouble. Butcher has been involved with Alan McKnight, and now I fancy the Rangers captain could be in the most severe trouble. Here's what happened. McKnight going up with Butcher. Butcher leaping at the keeper. McKnight was bundled. The players clashed on the ground now. The corner of the box is Francis' shot, and there was the trouble involving McKnight and Butcher. Now just look at this as Butcher is being called to the referee, and the captain of Rangers is undoubtedly going to be ordered off. England international defender, the Rangers captain, booked in the first half, and now shown the red card. Good play again from Ferguson. Here's Gough. Still Richard Gough. Now McCoy to a great chance for Rangers. He's made it! Rangers are right back in the match. Ali McCoy with his 19th goal of the season. And Ibrox erupts once again. But in the final minute of the match, Grant turns it behind for a goal kick to Rangers, and I suspect that may even have been deliberate. To allow Celtic to regroup around the halfway line. Ferguson playing it wide for Durant. Rogan comes to meet him. Oh, that's good running by Durant. He's away from Rogan. The early ball inside. McCarthy did well with the header, but it's Durant again. The last chance perhaps for Rangers. The chance is on for Goff. Richard Goff makes it 2 apiece. And the final minute of the match. What incredible drama here at Ibrox.
Okay, boys, there is a whole hour on this somewhere on the network. We don't have to go into this kind of depth. I think it symbolises that, David, this is mayhem. This is a situation that could have been easily avoided and wasn't. And you have a Rangers captain already on a booking with a ridiculous second booking. And on that time capsule episode, Hoggy makes the claim that he sold it. He wanted out of there. You get Graham Robertson goal. Celtic are rampant, and the feeling is that the roof could cave in here. Goff is now seemingly playing as a number 10 at one point. A beautiful ball in for McCoy's for that goal back, and then popping up as a number 9, a poacher to prod in the equaliser. Felt like a win. Butcher had to be coaxed out by Souness, who Butcher was in a foul mood, but to celebrate with the players. But celebrating a draw when Rangers really needed a win going into that game, there's a lot of conflicting emotions about this game on the day and maybe since. Where does it sit for you?
Yeah, I mean, it's a draw, so you can't really, it's a draw. And therefore, I think you always need a victory to be in your head, but it is mental. I mean, it's a crazy game of football. It was ferocious. It was wild. Again, everybody's losing their head on the park this day. It was oddly refereed for a game of that era, Martyn. There's a reason that certain big decisions from this era stick in our minds, and it's because they were unusual. And back then, for example, to send off a goalkeeper it just didn't happen, because you would leave the other team without, leave a team without a goalkeeper, for example. So I think that the referee got caught up in it as well. When Celtic get themselves ahead, I mean, they were going nuts, to the point that Peter Grant even thought he saw a golf ball with a nail in it pass his head, despite there being no evidence whatsoever that took place. We'll put that down to, as I say, giddiness rather than he was lying. But Rangers fight back, and it's grim determination to get there. And I think a little bit of hysteria creeps into the Celtic back line as they begin to panic, and it allows Goff to turn. Lovely finish. We interviewed him in Heart and Hand, and he says, I don't get enough credit for that. That's a striker's finish, and it was. But I think there was this feeling that we were becoming a little bit of a circus is too strong a word, but there's a lot happening that isn't always about the football at the moment. It just seemed we were a very highly strung team, and that we were either up there or down there, and jumping between the two really quickly. Bipolar's maybe the word, I don't know, but we never seemed to have just a kind of little even period where we were just, chuntering along quite happily. We were either these massive highs or these low lows, and this game encapsulates that. They were too wound up before it. And to your previous point, I think it's a legit discussion point. Was it the lead from the manager? Because Butcher and Woods are out there, and they're at DEFCON 3 already, and the game's 5 minutes old. Now, what then happens is, again, civic society getting involved in stuff that it absolutely doesn't have to. For the players to be charged was ludicrous, absolutely ludicrous, and sets a terrible precedent. And I don't think it's any surprise that it hasn't really happened again, because, with maybe the exception of Duncan Ferguson, because you are opening a can of worms there. If in sporting contests that's going to happen, my goodness, in ice hockey you would have guys going to prison, and these are not criminal acts, and to suggest they were is awful, I think, and just grandstanding of the first order. And again, I think it was people Rangers are always the number one box office in the country, but at this point in Scotland, well, there wasn't a lot going on. There wasn't an awful lot of entertainment options. With Souness coming in, Rangers we almost felt space age to me, and people didn't like it. People felt we were flash, and these are words that get thrown at Souness, and almost came to embody him. People felt we were flash and arrogant and needed taking down a peg or two. And that's the only thing I can think of for, first of all, the decisions, because way over the top, could have been calmed down. Secondly, what happens after the match. But the Rangers team does battle, does put in a great display, aided by the crowd, who are in fantastic full voice. But I just think that this was an absolute freak of a match that was more to do with other people's perception of Rangers than us. But maybe you guys disagree, but I think that for all three of the players to end up in court, based on the four of the players to end up in court over this, I just find an absolute nonsense. And still, 34 years later, I just think it is disgraceful grandstanding.
Well, there was one that probably could have landed in court, and he I don't think even got booked, because I'm pretty sure Graham Roberts throws the punch, which you are not allowed to do on a football pitch or in a nightclub, or you will end up in front of the police. I think he always kind of got away with that, but it was so overblown. Alan, the media went to town on the violence, on the sectarian behaviour. Of course, Roberts conducting the Billy Boys after Owen Archdeacon had followed through right into him when he was in goals just after the equaliser. There's a lot of moralising, a lot of grandstanding, and of course the Procurator Fiscal getting involved as well. When that case went to court, there's a lot of evidence about just how frenzied the crowd was before the game. Contorted faces and spitting and all sorts. Can you remember it feeling pre-match any different to any kind of Old Firm game?
Absolutely not. I mean, obviously it was Celtic coming to Ibrox, to play us. No, just your typical Old Firm game, to be honest with you, Martin. There was nothing different. Okay, as David said, we were kind of space age and we had pretty much got back to champions, and now obviously Gough was coming. The big excitement with that as well, another addition. They've got McAvenny, but no, there was nothing at all like that, certainly before the game started. But it did, I must admit, early on, to me, the referee could probably have done something earlier on to calm it down and didn't. And from my point of view, I actually felt as if Celtic had deliberately kind of tried to target and wind up. And I think if you go back to the season before, even with Hamiltonakis, remember Roberts and Durant get sent off, it's as if these teams before are going, well, you know what they're like, they're so wound up. And it certainly looked like that. And I know later on we played them at Parkhead and the way they carried on too. So that didn't help. But to me, no, nothing at all.
It was deliberate. It was deliberate. I mean, just before the top blew off, there was a pass back by Jimmy Phillips to Chris Woods. Yeah. And McAvenny is about 5 yards away at the time the cross was blocked. Decided just to continue his run into Woods. He'd already been bundled into kind of Nat Lofthouse style just before that, and Butcher says, I mean, kind of strong arm tactics, even for an Old Firm game on a goalkeeper, was maybe a bit much. So they're on edge and maybe a need to defend their goalkeeper, because that's kind of what teams do. Yeah. A word before we move on for the man of the match was Derek Ferguson in the middle of the park again, Alan. Not his first man of the match performance against Celtic under Souness.
I honestly saw him as basically a young Souness in terms of the way he carried himself. It was to me, it was absolutely top quality. I think some of the stuff, obviously, you talked about outside of football, and then he ended up got a problem with his shoulder and so on. It kept popping out. But to me, even when everyone went on about Durant and so on, I just thought Derek Ferguson, he had so much potential, and it was actually such a shame that he never fulfilled it, Martyn.
Ah, well, indeed. We will get onto this in about 4 weeks, I imagine. About Souness's aggression and getting teams fired up, but out of control. Control would be found again, and that controlled aggression would be used to devastating effect the first time Celtic came to Ibrox the following season. But we will get to all that in due course. All this drama and mayhem, however, meant that Rangers would be going into a cup final, the Skull League Cup final, of course, against Aberdeen, without their captain and goalkeeper. Well, a lot of fun would ensue.
Jim Bett. And here's Bett against Walker. Brilliantly finished. Roberts is dictating things. That's brilliantly struck by Davy Cooper. 21 minutes gone, Rangers have equalised. And a stunning free kick from Davy Cooper. Well, they don't come any better than this. Thundering a ball past the wall. Leighton had no chances, that thundered into the roof of the net. Jimmy Nichols' header, there's Fleck. Durant's header to McCoist. There's Durant, a great chance for Rangers. And that was magnificent. Walter Smith relishes the moment, and well he might. That was a superb goal from Ian Durant. Far post cross, Walker caught in two minds. Here's a great chance for Hewitt. Yes! Joe Miller back to Bett. Towards Faulkner! Willie Faulkner's header, and Aberdeen are ahead. For Aberdeen, they're all back defending as Nicol returns it. Roberts with the header, there's Ian Durant, and Fleck! Fleck, who ties it up again at 3 apiece this time. So another expert in the penalty spot. Remember the one he scored for Scotland against Wales in Cardiff to get Scotland on course for the World Cup. Here he goes again. Absolutely deadly. Acknowledges the Rangers fans, but he can put them on either side this time. He sends Leighton the wrong way. So there's the scoreline by Peter Nicholas. Experienced player showing the way for Aberdeen at the moment. Peter Nicholas scored 3 times this season for Aberdeen, and another crucial moment for him. And a disaster for Aberdeen, and for Peter Nicholas in particular. By Weir. But is he going to replace the ball on the spot? Well, this can't do his nerves any good at all, even with his experience. Very short run up from Francis, but thoroughly effective, and Leighton is frustrated. He guessed right that time. He just wasn't quick enough to get across to his right. So a bit of prayer, I think, for Joe Miller as Leighton prepares to face Ian Durant. Now it certainly would be fitting if Durant took the final kick to win the cup for Rangers. If Durant scores, Rangers are the winners. There will be no need for any other kick. Perfectly taken by Durant. Rangers have won the Skull League Cup after a match packed full of drama.
Around the time that Chris Woods was walking off, Nicky Walker was injured. He at that time, the reverse fixtures would be the reserve fixture. So Rangers were at Parkhead playing the reserves, and Nicky Walker had taken a bit of a knock, and Peter McCloy came over and said, "Look, Woods has just been sent off. You need to just get off the park and just we'll just look after you. Are you fit to play?" He says, "Look, I really shouldn't have said I was fit to play, but I wasn't. But you're going to play in a cup final, really." He'd never beaten Aberdeen in his career at Rangers, and it would be a big task. A new defensive partnership of Gough moved into the middle alongside Graham Roberts against an Aberdeen team who were pretty decent. Ian Porterfield now the manager, not Alex Ferguson. 3 points out of Rangers in the league, had a good European result themselves. They beat Feyenoord 2-1. And listen, the passage of time, the advancements in our game, there are more technically astute, tactically intelligent cup finals. I don't think there's any that are as fun as this one. 3-3, Rangers win on penalties. A few things to take away. That partnership of Gough and Roberts is garbage. It just doesn't work. They don't communicate. They looked shaky from the get-go. Aberdeen could have easily been 2 up in those early stages. It's an utter shambles. We will come to that later episodes, I think it's fair to say. Davy Cooper does not touch the ball for 21 minutes, and then he gets that free kick. And I love his explanation in the Evening Times the next day that I had the wind behind me, just blasted it, as if you and I could do that. That's all we needed was a wee bit of gust. And we forget about that Rangers second. Utter brilliance and opportunism and intelligence, and the finish from Durant. We forget about Aberdeen's comeback and Ian St John's disgraceful punditry when he's shouting and screaming for goals, and it looked like here's another disastrous result, and Wee Fleck pops up possibly a little offside to push the game into extra time, which is tired and is stretched but totally intoxicating, totally entertaining. Joe Miller cramps up when he could have run away and broke away and finished the cup tie. He would not take a penalty, as it would turn out. Trevor Francis is just strolling around the Hampden pitch as if he was playing at a Sunday school trip. His penalty, the one step. We've seen Jim Leighton furious about many things, but few as good as that, being beaten by such insouciance. Peter Nicholas, Aberdeen's Welshman, didn't want to take a penalty. He'd missed 2 penalties for Luton Town the previous season, and again was only on the list because of Joe Miller's difficulty in standing up. He was a bit unlucky, he hit the bar. Nicky Walker, I think, has got the cheek to kind of celebrate that as if he made a save, but there we are. And I think appropriately, David, the scene was set for Ian Durant to take the winning penalty, which he does coolly and perfectly. The shame of the previous weekend and a lot of concern about the state of the game and all these kind of things blown away by just a pure footballing experience.
This is chaos. This is an action movie. This is Die Hard. This is just, it's everything. The story is set, with the suspensions, and to be with it, Butcher and Woods, there are Diamond Ring and Cartier Watch. There are representations of this new era. The star players, and Nicky Walker was somebody I just identified with the rubbish era. Not his fault, but that's what I did. And for him to be playing meant that the number one couldn't. So I thought that was a big blow. I didn't know at the time that he was injured. I don't think I'd have slept if I'd known that. But you're absolutely right. The game just unfolds into this chaotic whirl of it's like a kaleidoscope with a football whizzing about in it. It's just incredible. And the goal from Davy Cooper is just unbelievable. I did like, the next Scotland gathering, Jim Leighton said, I nearly got a hand to it, and of course Cooper went aye on the way out. And he was right. It was just sensational. The second goal is one of the best goals I've ever seen Rangers score.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
And it doesn't get enough love. It's beautiful. Everything about it is beautiful. The movement, the pass round the corner, the touch, and then how many players just smash that?
Yeah, it's so cheeky. It's so
so graceful at the end as well, isn't it?
Because it's all in one movement. There you go. They're lovely. I'll just pass this into the net. Second half, that great thing that used to happen at Skull Cup finals, where it would start off light and in the second half. I always think that adds a sort of epic dimension to it, because it's like you've been playing for hours. In this game, it felt like we've been playing for hours as the darkness descends. And of course, Aberdeen, they fight their way back into it. You're right about Ian St John. I genuinely wondered if Ian St John was drunk that day, and certainly having heard, Archie Macpherson and various other people who were in the Scottish media at the time, I think he'd enjoyed the Hampden hospitality. But you're right, it's a disgrace for a commentator to be roaring, cheering when he's supposed to be neutral. I think is
off mic, because he's obviously, if he was roaring cheering, it would have broke the bloody thing. So he's off mic.
But you could hear him.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a chance. There's another chance for Aberdeen that he's very excited about. And I know we're obsessed by media narrative and bias, and someone's got an opinion about a Rangers player I don't like. They should be sacked from their job. Nothing I have seen in my adult life comes close to this display.
It was awful, and I mean it was genuinely bulk-inducing, and I can't believe for a second. Well, they never had him back. So I can't believe for a second that the STV were massively impressed. I wonder if they were maybe told from down south.
David, he comes from Motherwell. I actually know, kind of where he came from, and everyone knows him. And yeah, he was never for Rangers at all.
Never. Well, which is fine, but go get your hospitality
unprofessional,
ticket, get drunk, but don't go in. And he would never have done it in a game down south. That's the difference. He would never have done. He was a big Liverpool man. He would never do it when he was doing Liverpool v Everton. So then when it goes to penalties, I'm already, thank God I was young, because my heart spent 90 minutes in my throat trying to get out. Good penalties from Rangers. I think
super penalties.
If you score all five, you deserve your. You think Nicholas doesn't look comfortable at all as he walks up. I didn't know about that he didn't want to hit one. I just assumed that he was sixth on the. He'd volunteered, and they said no, but you take first if it goes to that. He doesn't look happy. I think if you're not happy, don't try and lift it, because he does. But again, it's maybe that. The nerves, because he leans back, and he's an experienced player at this stage. Nicholas, I think he had something like 50 caps for Wales, and as you said, he played for Arsenal and Luton Town. And
there's a Christian Vieri in that European, that UEFA Cup semi-final of just, you're watching it almost in slow motion, going, his body's quite far back. This could go quite sky high, and it does. You're watching it on the telly, David?
I am, and I'll always. It's well remembered in my family, because I was left to watch it with my granddad. And my mum took my grand shopping, and the last words to me was, "Don't let your papa get drunk." Right. So
what shops would have been open on a Sunday in those days?
Well, that's the thing, Martin. It was the drinks cabinet, and they'd been given as an anniversary present this bottle of 50-year-old Scotch whisky, which I think was to be opened at the resurrection only. But my papa said, "Go into the drinks cabinet, see if you can find anything." I'm 10, right? So I just see this bottle, and I open it and I pour it into his glass for him. When they came in at the end, he is stocious. He's put away 3/4 of this bottle. It wasn't his fault, because you're trying to be helpful. So I was just, anytime I saw his glass empty, and I just filled it up for him. And I don't think he knew why he was so drunk. But they came home to find the two of us dancing around the living room, just quite happy, because, as I say, at 5-4 in a penalty shootout, it's one of those games that genuinely, it's such a cliche that nobody deserved to lose, and nobody did, but it's a cup final, somebody has to. I do think, though, if I'm an Aberdeen fan, because again, Aberdeen are a right good team back then, please don't, people should not forget this, to be taking on a Rangers team that had been shorn of Butcher and Woods, to be taking on a Rangers team with an unfit goalkeeper, and to be taking on a Rangers team that were the centre-back partnership. It was new. It had never been tried before. Gough was only on the scene a few weeks. There was zero understanding whatsoever, which meant there was hesitancy between them. I think it's a worse result for them than us. And you can point out that penalties are a lottery. I don't believe penalties are a lottery. I think it comes down to things like skill and nerve, and Rangers had more of it on that day.
Yeah, I think that team as well, David, you've got Leighton, McKinney, McLeish, Miller, Jim Bett. I mean, some real quality in there, Hewitt. But the Rangers team, you're probably talking about maybe 8 of them being the previous one before Souness took over. With Walker, Nicholl, kind of Monroe as well, then Ferguson, Durrant, Cooper, McCoy's Flick. So, I think that shows you. And obviously up front, the Ferguson, Durrant, Cooper, McCoy's Flick, they were absolutely flying. But for the penalties point of view, Martin, we were in the Rangers end again, which was great, because if you remember the year before, we're in there and the one that breaks to be Durrant, he puts it away, and then Davy scores a penalty, and then we're right behind as well at the penalties. So they're just great memories for me, to be honest with you. And ultimately when they come round with the trophy at the end.
Was that the first time you'd seen Rangers in a penalty shootout? Certainly one of note. I mean, there might have been some kind of pre-season tournament that used it, but I mean that must have been a bit of a novelty. And
yeah, I don't remember it in a big game at all, to be honest with you, Martin. No.
We're going to talk about the Skull Cup and the League Cup through whatever iteration as this series develops, because it was a competition that was kind to Rangers.
Mm-hmm.
there might be better ones, as I said. I just don't think Rangers have been involved in a cup final as fun as this. This is, I think, of its age. It was, and they would go again the next year. We'll get to that. I don't think it's quite as good, but there's just something fabulously entertaining about this cup final.
This is better than even the Liverpool one, because the Liverpool one is amazing as it was. They were 3-0 down, played off the park, then they get back to 3 each, and then both sides don't do very much up until the penalties. This was just 90 minutes of seesaw. This
extra time, especially.
It's extra time, David,
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah,
I think McCoy's like so many chances and that at the
Oh,
end.
you couldn't go out the room. You know what I mean? It was like that. It was from the first to the very last. Thank God there wasn't the in-play betting back then, because you could have lost your shot. It seesawed, and there was momentum shifts because both sides, as Alan mentioned, had too many good players to be dominated and playing well. Too many players, you're both playing well. But you add into that frenetic nature of 80s Scottish football, and neither team would give it up. And they take the lead, we take the lead, they take the lead. It swings backwards and forwards so often. I look, there will be higher technical levels of football. I don't doubt that for a second. But see, if you just want entertainment, I'd show that game to anybody. And I bet you, even now, and
I think when we say higher, I would agree. I think when we talk about higher technical levels, Davey, there are, just in terms of the approach, right? Teams will be far better organised, they'll be far smarter, the space just won't exist. But you're still talking about the first two Rangers goals being up there with the best. I mean, Cooper's free kick, I think was the second best in our 50 greatest goals poll of all time, in terms of Rangers goals. The second one, as you mentioned, terribly underrated just because of Cooper's. You've got France's penalty, which
first time I had ever
we should
seen
be in the Louvre.
Someone taking one like that for us, Martyn. It was so strange,
So there's just so much going on of quality, but I appreciate maybe the space that the players had to enjoy is maybe something that seems like watching the Pathy News coverage of the 58 World Cup was to me at that age. Something of a bygone era when you watch it now. And, well, it should be, because it's the same kind of time span, really. Sad as that is to think about. Gents, for all the turmoil of this early part of the season, it's another trophy in the bag, Alan. We'll just keep doing it.
And it's one of our favourites. That was our trophy. But no, you're absolutely right. So again, at this point in time, we're a wee bit behind in the league. We're still going good stuff in obviously the European Cup, and a wee shiny thing, Martyn. So let's see what happens next.
And David, other than the trophy being secured, Ian Durrant has a big about turn in his contractual dispute, and he kind of signs a new deal, and everything's kind of patched over right before that cup final.
Yeah, and you see why the day after. It's a very interesting topic for a whole nother show, Martyn, but the difference in player power to then and to now, there was almost...
Players wouldn't play for the rest of the season, would they go through the motions now?
No, but you're signing a new contract as well. But if you wouldn't sign a new contract, clubs were almost offended. I think we all remember Jim McLean with his 10-year contracts where they weren't allowed out the house, and him being amazed that players would somehow, if you fancy a move somewhere else at some point. But it was just different, and the relationship between clubs and players were different. But yeah, I think that, as Alan said, you did feel that, well, we're getting used to this now. That's 3 trophies in 15 months. This is what we do now. For me, what we do now. For Alan, this is us back to doing what we do. But for me, this is it now. We will just go, and my belief, as I say, in Souness was total. But even as I say, then there is still this noticeable to me, even as a child, noticeable to my schoolmates, even as children, that there is still this chaos. that there's always a story in the paper, there's something going on. We're playing in matches like that. Like, no way were we ever going to win a cup 3-0 in a very straightforward. It was going to be like that. It was going to be the whole season. I think is like a boxing match, sometimes literally, but where you're either getting punched or you're swinging back, and this game is probably the best representation. But where we were right now, you're thinking, hey, we can do it without Butcher and Woods. These boys are all, they've all grown now. Look at them, look at what they can do. We're doing well in Europe. I mentioned it the last time I was on the show. I just kind of felt that the sky was the limit for Rangers FC at this point, and the evidence seemed to back me up.
A good point to end, gentlemen. Thank you very much, David.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Alan.
Yeah, thanks, Martyn. Really enjoyed it. Thanks.
Thanks to the listener who grabbed me outside Tannadice today to say that she thoroughly enjoyed the show. She was listening, I think, to a couple of episodes on the way to the game. I don't know if she was driving from Plymouth. She managed to get 2 episodes of this in on her drive, but it was much appreciated. I hope you are all enjoying it. Wee bit of admin. There was talk that there would be a book based on this series, these 12 seasons. There was, David, yes. One book isn't going to happen, it's too big, and I wasn't prepared to cut down the words just to squeeze it all in, so there will be two volumes, one from 86 to 92 and then from 92 to 98. 2 very distinct stories, 2 very distinct parts of this era. I hope you'll enjoy those when they come out. The first one should be out for Christmas, but we will wrap up now, and wrap up in a decent place. Storm clouds still there, guys. I think they're still visible, but no sense of panic. An increasing optimism, really, that Rangers would build on this cup success and hunt down the league leaders as they'd done the year before. Only 4 points behind Celtic with a game in hand. The next major test of that resurgence would involve Aberdeen once more when they visited Ibrox on the 17th of November. Only 6 minutes had gone when Terry Butcher swung his trusted left leg at an Arrow Davy Cooper cross before Alex McLeish could get to the ball first. Butcher and everyone connected with Rangers would very quickly wish that McLeish had. Until next time, bye for now.